Welcome to our deep dive into the very heart of what makes us human. We're going to be exploring the fascinating world of the human mind, and you know how it stacks up against our animal relatives. We've got excerpts from a book written by a leading scientist in evolutionary psychology and comparative cognition to guide us. It's going to be quite a journey as we unpack what makes human minds so unique.
It really is about so much more than intelligence. I think we'll be delving into the very structure of thought and how we perceive the world and what truly distinguishes us from other species.
All right, so let's jump right in. This author throws out a pretty interesting fact right at the beginning. You ready for this? Humans are actually closer to chimpanzees than chimpanzees are to gorillas.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder of our shared history, our evolutionary history. But even with those close genetic ties, there's a significant mental gap between us and our primate cousins.
Right. It's not just that we're just smart apes. We seem to be operating on an entirely different level. And speaking of differences, the author points out a few physical distinctions that set us apart, like walking upright, all those sweat glands, and the lack of a penis bone in human males.
All intriguing distinctions, but the one that really caught my eye was the author's emphasis on the chin. It's a seemingly small detail, but it's a uniquely human feature, and it speaks to the broader evolutionary journey that shaped our species.
The book talks about how Darwin predicted that understanding the gradation of mental powers across species would revolutionize psychology, and it feels like we're still on that journey of discovery even over 150 years later.
Absolutely, unraveling the mysteries of the mind and pinpointing what makes us human is an ongoing quest. And one compelling theory that might offer some clues is the social brain hypothesis. It suggests that primate intelligence, and perhaps our own, evolved not just to solve physical challenges, but to navigate the complexities of social life.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So what can we learn from our other primate relatives about how our own social intelligence evolved?
Well, the author dives into a fascinating array of primate species, but it's a sobering reminder, though, that some of our closest relatives are facing serious threats. Did you know there are fewer than 2,000 Haine black-crested gibbons left in the wild?
That's heartbreaking. Hopefully we can find ways to protect them and other endangered species.
Indeed. But shifting to the great apes, we see some striking parallels to human behavior. For instance, great apes, just like us, make laughter-like vocalizations when they're playing. It seems like tickling is a universal primate pastime.
I love that. So we share a sense of humor, at least on some level. What about other great apes? Do they give us any clues about social intelligence?
Orangutans, for example, are typically solitary in their natural habitat. But in captivity, they exhibit surprising social complexity, which supports the social brain hypothesis. And then there are gorillas who use intricate techniques to process their food. Young gorillas learn these techniques through careful observation, highlighting the crucial role of social learning in their development.
That makes sense. It's like an apprenticeship for gorillas, learning from the more experienced members of their group.
Precisely. And of course, there are chimpanzees known for their sophisticated tool use for hunting, but they also exhibit a capacity for violence and even organized raids, reminding us that aggression is deeply rooted in our shared evolutionary past.
It is a bit unsettling to see those darker aspects reflected in our primate relatives. But it's not all about conflict, right?
Right. The book also introduces us to the fascinating world of bonobos. They're renowned for their peaceful nature, female-dominated societies, and frequent use of sex for social bonding. It challenges our assumptions about primate social structures and provides valuable insights into the diversity of evolutionary paths.
Okay, I need to hear more about these bonobos. They sound like they've got it figured out. But before we go there, this next section really blew my mind. It's all about mind reading, which, to be clear for our listener, means our ability to infer the mental states of others.
Think about it. We do this constantly in our daily interactions.
Yeah.
How often do you try to figure out what someone really means when they speak, going beyond just their words to understand their underlying intentions?
Oh, all the time. But this ability, which we often take for granted, doesn't just magically appear. The book explains how it actually develops gradually in children.
Right, take the false belief test, for example. Young children struggle with this because they haven't yet grasped that someone else can hold a belief that differs from reality.
I remember learning about that. It's like the classic Sally Ann test. A
Hmm.
character believes an object is in a specific spot, but it's been moved without them knowing, and kids often have trouble understanding that the character's belief is no longer accurate.
Exactly. It highlights the complex process of understanding other minds, a complexity that might be uniquely human. Which brings us to a fascinating question. Do you think animals possess this theory of mind, the ability to recognize that others can hold beliefs that are different from reality?
It's a tough one. I'm really curious to hear more about the research on that as we continue our deep dive. But before we get there, maybe we should shift gears and talk about another hallmark of the human mind: language.
Absolutely. The book quotes Aldous Huxley, who said, "Thanks to words, we have been able to rise above the brutes." It's a powerful statement about the transformative power of language.
It makes you wonder, though, what exactly sets human language apart from other forms of communication in the animal kingdom?
Well, it's not just that we use words. Human language is distinct because of its symbolic nature, its generative power, and its capacity for recursion. Recursion is the ability to embed thoughts within thoughts, creating those beautifully complex sentences that seem to have no end.
The book uses the search for the longest sentence as a fun example of how language can be endlessly expanded. It's a stark contrast to animal communication systems, which tend to be much more limited in scope.
Think about vervet monkeys. They have distinct calls for different predators, but these calls are fixed and lack the open-endedness of human language.
It's amazing to think about how much we convey through language. It really does shape our understanding of the world.
It truly does. And while some chimpanzees have learned to use lexicograms to communicate, their communication, while impressive, still falls short of true language. They don't exhibit the same complex grammar or the drive to teach or ask about the world that we see in humans.
Speaking of anticipating the future, that brings us to the fascinating topic of mental time travel and our ability to recall the past and imagine what lies ahead.
And to illustrate this, the book starts with the compelling case of Clive Waring, a man who, due to brain damage, lost his episodic memory, and as a result, his ability to imagine the future.
Wait, so losing his memory of past events also impacted his ability to envision the future. What's the connection there?
It highlights a surprising point.
Hmm.
Memory's primary function may not be to simply record the past, but to prepare us for the future.
So it's not just about reminiscing, it's about using past experiences to navigate the future.
Precisely. Think about those everyday items you carry with you, like your keys, your wallet, your phone. You carry these items not because of what they represent in the past, but because you anticipate needing them in the future.
It's like our bags or pockets offer a glimpse into our anticipated future selves. That's a really interesting way to think about it.
And this ability to consciously recall specific events, what we call episodic memory, and project ourselves forward in time with episodic foresight seems to be uniquely human.
So just to clarify for our listener, episodic memory is like mentally reliving a specific event with all its sensory details. And episodic foresight is the same, but projected into the future. But what about animals? Don't they show signs of memory and anticipation?
Of course, animals have memory, and they can anticipate certain events. But there's no evidence to suggest they can consciously relive past experiences or plan for the distant future in the way that humans can.
The book gives the example of digger wasps, who exhibit seemingly complex, future-oriented behavior by provisioning their young with food.
Exactly. But if their routine is disrupted, they can't adapt, revealing a lack of true understanding. It suggests their behavior is driven by instinct rather than conscious foresight.
So even seemingly intelligent behavior in animals can be more about pre-programmed responses than true mental time travel.
Right, and this takes us back to the mental gap. This capacity for mental time travel, coupled with our ability to connect minds through language, is a significant part of what makes us human.
It allows us to collaborate, build on the knowledge of past generations, and shape the future in a way that no other animal can. We've covered a lot of ground already, and there's still so much more to explore.
Indeed. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll delve into the nature of human intelligence, the concept of cumulative culture, and the fascinating puzzle of morality.
All right, let's keep this deep dive rolling. We left off talking about how humans are unique in our ability for mental time travel, but I'm really curious to dig into what makes human intelligence so special. I mean, it's clearly more than just, acing an IQ test, right?
You're absolutely right. The book really challenges that traditional view of intelligence, and it emphasizes the importance of adaptability, creativity, and how we use information to solve problems and come up with new ideas.
Okay, I'm with you so far, but how does that translate into, the actual workings of our brains?
Well, a key element is what's called working memory, that mental workspace where we hold and manipulate information. It's crucial for reasoning, problem solving, and those aha moments of insight we all experience.
So it's like our brains have a built-in workbench where all the cognitive magic happens.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And just like a real workbench, The more efficiently we use this mental space, the more complex our thinking becomes.
I'm starting to see the connection here. But our mental workbenches aren't infinite, right? How do we manage all the information coming at us?
That's where chunking comes in. It's a strategy we use to boost our working memory capacity, by grouping individual bits of information into larger, more meaningful concepts.
Okay, I think I get it. It's like remembering a phone number. Instead of trying to memorize 10 separate digits, we chunk them into smaller groups, making them easier to recall.
Exactly. Chunking helps us overcome those limitations of working memory and handle more complex information. And this leads to a fascinating comparison the author makes between human intelligence and what they call laser beam intelligence in animals.
Laser beam intelligence, that sounds intense.
Yeah, think of it as being super clever in a specific area, but with limited flexibility. We see this with animal tool use. For instance, gorillas can select a stick of just the right length to reach a tasty treat, and crows can even fashion tools to get to other tools.
So they're brilliant problem solvers in their own right, but there's a difference.
The key difference is that while animals excel in specific domains, they don't display the same open-ended creativity and innovation that drives human progress.
So we're not just good at using tools, we're driven to invent and improve upon them.
Exactly. We build upon the inventions of previous generations, creating this ever-expanding collection of knowledge, skills, and technology that the author calls cumulative culture.
It's mind-blowing to think about how much we rely on the contributions of those who came before us, from the language we speak to the technology we use daily. It's all part of this incredible inheritance.
And the book delves into the mechanisms that enable this cultural transmission,
Hmm.
teaching and imitation. Humans have this natural inclination to share what we know and learn from others.
It's like we're wired for it, constantly seeking out new information and integrating it into our understanding of the world.
And speaking of learning from others, the author highlights this phenomenon called over-imitation, where kids meticulously copy even the unnecessary steps in a task just because they observed an adult doing it that way.
Okay, I have to admit that one's a little puzzling. Wouldn't it be more efficient to just focus on the essential steps?
That's a great point. But imagine learning a complex skill like weaving, faithfully copying every detail, even if we don't immediately grasp the why, might actually be the best way to ensure we get it right.
It's like a built-in safety mechanism for cultural transmission. We absorb the entire process, ensuring nothing gets lost along the way.
Precisely. And language plays a crucial role here. It allows us to communicate not just actions, but ideas, intentions, and explanations, enriching the learning process and further fueling cumulative culture.
It creates this incredible feedback loop where teaching and imitation work together to refine and expand our collective knowledge. It's really remarkable when you think about it. But this brings up another intriguing question that the book tackles. How did morality evolve, given that it often requires acting against our own self-interest?
Yeah, that's one of the great mysteries of human nature. From a purely evolutionary perspective, it seems counterintuitive. Why would we develop a sense of right and wrong that sometimes compels us to put others' needs before our own?
It doesn't seem to make sense in terms of survival of the fittest.
Exactly. But the book explores the fascinating interplay of cooperation, reciprocity, and social norms, suggesting that morality might be more advantageous than it appears at first glance.
So maybe there's an evolutionary payoff to being good.
That's one possibility. The book cites research by Michael Tomasello, who found that even very young infants display prosocial urges, helping others even before they're taught to do so.
So maybe we have an innate predisposition for cooperation and altruism, something deeply ingrained in our nature.
It's certainly a compelling idea. And on a larger scale, moral codes act as a kind of user manual for societies, establishing shared expectations about what is considered obligatory, forbidden, and virtuous.
These norms help regulate behavior and promote cooperation, which is crucial for building larger, more complex societies. And it's not just about following the rules, right? There's also this element of holding others accountable.
You're referring to third-party punishment, where individuals are penalized for transgressions, even by those not directly affected by the offense.
Oh, exactly. It's like we have this inherent sense of fairness and justice that extends beyond our immediate circle. We care about what's right, even when it doesn't directly impact us.
It speaks to how intertwined our social intelligence and moral sense truly are. And this capacity for moral reasoning, this ability to judge actions based on a sense of right and wrong, seems to be absent in other animals.
But what about those heartwarming stories of animals showing empathy or helping each other? Doesn't that suggest some level of moral understanding?
While animals can exhibit empathy and cooperation, there's no evidence for the same kind of self-reflective judgment or third-party punishment.
So while it's tempting to project human-like moral reasoning onto animals, we have to be cautious about making those assumptions.
Right. We can speculate, but without a clear understanding of their internal reasoning and motivations, attributing moral judgments to animals remains a gray area.
It seems we still have a lot to learn about the origins of human morality and what sets it apart.
Indeed. And as our deep dive continues, we'll explore how these themes of intelligence, culture, and morality intertwine to create that complex tapestry of the human experience.
We've been exploring all these incredible facets of the human mind, like intelligence, culture, morality. And I'm starting to see how they all fit together, but I'm still wondering, where did all these amazing mental abilities come from? How did we get from those simple life forms to beings capable of, like, composing symphonies and launching rockets into space?
Well, that's where our evolutionary journey comes in. The book takes us on this fascinating tour of hominin evolution, tracing the development of those traits that make us uniquely human.
So we're going way back in time, millions of years, to uncover the roots of the mental gap. I'm ready to meet our ancient ancestors.
All right, well, our journey starts with Sahelanthropus chansis, a species that lived over 6 million years ago. They had a small brain, about the size of a modern chimpanzee's.
Not exactly the brainiacs we are today, huh?
Not quite. But here's the intriguing part. There's evidence they walked upright, suggesting an early shift in our lineage, a change that would have profound implications for our future evolution.
So even at this early stage, we see hints of those physical adaptations that would pave the way for our later cognitive development.
Exactly. Then we move on to Australopithecus, a group of hominins who lived between 4 and 2 million years ago. They were more adept at tool use and potentially had a more human-like brain organization.
I've always been fascinated by the idea that we can learn about ancient brains just by looking at fossilized skulls.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can glean from these ancient remnants. And while there's still debate about the finer details, it seems that these early hominins were already showing signs of increased cognitive complexity.
So the trend here is clear. Bigger brains, better tools, more complex behavior. It's like evolution was slowly but surely laying the groundwork for something extraordinary.
Precisely. And that trend continues with Homo habilis, who lived around 2 million years ago. They had a larger brain and a more sophisticated toolkit than their predecessors, suggesting a greater capacity for mental scenario building.
It seems like each step in our evolutionary journey brought us closer to that unique way of thinking that sets us apart.
Exactly. And then comes Homo erectus, a truly remarkable species that was the first to venture out of Africa. They controlled fire and created a distinctive type of hand axe, the Acheulean hand axe.
The Acheulean hand axe, that rings a bell. Didn't they use that same tool design for over 1 million years?
You're absolutely right. It remained virtually unchanged for an incredibly long period, which speaks to their ability to transmit knowledge across generations. But it also makes you wonder, why they didn't innovate more, why they stuck with the same design for so long.
It's a good question. If they had the cognitive capacity to spread knowledge, why not experiment and develop new tools?
It's possible their mental capacity for open-ended creativity hadn't yet reached the level we see in later hominins. Perhaps they were incredibly adept at solving immediate problems, but not as skilled at envisioning new possibilities.
So their laser beam intelligence served them well, but there is still a limit to their cognitive flexibility.
That's one way to look at it. And then we encounter a group known as archaic Homo sapiens, with even larger brains and evidence for more advanced tools and potentially the beginnings of language.
This is where things start to get really interesting, isn't it? We're starting to see those hallmarks of the mental gap taking shape.
Exactly. And this brings us to the fascinating case of the Neanderthals, a close relative of modern humans who lived in Europe and parts of Asia until about 40,000 years ago.
Neanderthals, I remember learning that we actually share some DNA with them. It always seemed mind-blowing to me that we weren't the only humans roaming the planet at one point.
It's true. Genetic analysis has revealed that early humans interbred with Neanderthals. So many of us carry traces of their genetic legacy. It's a reminder that our evolutionary history is more complex and intertwined than we once thought.
So they weren't just some separate species, they were part of our family tree. But they eventually disappeared, leaving us as the sole surviving hominin lineage. What happened?
That's a question that has puzzled scientists for decades. Neanderthals had brains as large as ours, they created sophisticated tools, and they may have even had some form of language. But despite their capabilities, they ultimately vanished.
You mentioned earlier that brain size isn't everything. So what gave our Homo sapien ancestors the edge? What ultimately led to their success while other hominins went extinct?
There are many theories, of course, but the book points to those recurring themes we've been discussing. Our capacity for open-ended mental scenario building, the drive to connect minds, and the ability to create cumulative culture.
It seems like these mental abilities, combined with our adaptability and our knack for cooperation, allowed us to thrive in diverse environments and to build those complex societies that ultimately outcompeted other hominin groups.
It's a compelling hypothesis, and it underscores the profound impact of the mental gap. It's not just about being intelligent, it's about the way we think, the way we interact, the way we build upon the knowledge of those who came before us.
It's like those unique mental abilities created a kind of snowball effect, propelling us forward on an evolutionary trajectory that no other species could match.
It's an incredible story, and one that's still unfolding. Because the book also makes us consider, the future of the mental gap. Where are we headed as a species? How will our minds continue to evolve?
That's a question I've been pondering throughout this entire deep dive. Knowing where we came from makes me even more curious about where we're going.
Right, and the book raises some thought-provoking questions about the future of human intelligence. For instance, some studies suggest that human brain size has actually decreased slightly over the past few thousand years.
Wait, smaller brains. But isn't that a sign of decreased intelligence?
It's not that straightforward. Some researchers believe it might be due to a decrease in environmental pressures, or perhaps our increasing reliance on technology has led to a sort of outsourcing of certain cognitive functions.
It makes you wonder if our brains are adapting to a world where we don't need to remember everything or do all the calculations ourselves.
Precisely. The book introduces the concept of the extended mind, the idea that technology is becoming increasingly integrated with our cognitive processes.
That makes sense. Think about how we rely on our smartphones for everything these days. Memory, navigation, even social interaction. It's like our minds are expanding beyond the confines of our skulls.
Exactly. And this raises profound questions about what it means to be human in an age of rapidly evolving technology and global interconnectedness. Are we becoming more intelligent, or are we simply changing the way we think?
So where does that leave us, deep divers? What have we learned from this incredible journey into the depths of the human mind?
We've explored how humans are unique, not just in our intelligence, but in our capacity for mental time travel, mind reading, language, and morality. These abilities, interwoven with a drive to connect and share our minds, have allowed us to create, the rich tapestry of human culture.
And understanding this mental gap, this collection of traits that sets us apart, isn't just about knowing where we came from. It's about using this knowledge to make informed choices about where we go next, individually and as a species.
As we navigate a world of ever-evolving technology and increasing interconnectedness, understanding the power and responsibility that come with our unique mental abilities becomes even more crucial.
It's been a truly mind-expanding deep dive, and I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on what it means to be human. Thanks for taking us on this incredible journey.
It's been my pleasure. And for all you deep divers out there, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep pushing the boundaries of your own understanding.